Starting a live video. Hey everybody, how you doing? Good afternoon. Let me find some place to put this. How's it going out there, everybody? This is Gene Tagaban with the Native Wellness Institute. Yeah, for our power hour. I'm not even sure what number this is. If Jolene or somebody's out there, give me a call or a text or, what's going on. Let's see here. Just kind of getting things set up here. So how are you doing today? How's your spirit? How's your spirit today? Oh, hang on, I gotta turn down the heater. All right, getting some texts here, some chats. People are watching, people are on. Cool. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Native Wellness Power Hour. I think we're like on maybe, I'm just going to throw it out there. Maybe we're on like week 50, 45, 50, something like that. Program 260. We've been going for since the closure of this pandemic. And welcome to this. This is the Native Wellness. Just call out to during this closure of the pandemic to just come out and create and show wellness and bring wellness to you. So allow me to introduce myself. My name is Gene Tagaban. My Tlingit name is Gayal. I'm of the Dukdane Tong clan, the Raven Freshwater Sockeye clan from Hoona, Alaska. The child of a Wishkatan Eagle Shark clan from Wahwan in Juneau, Alaska. I'm Cherokee, Tlingit, and Filipino. I tell people I'm a Cherokee Filipino. On my Cherokee side, my mother, her Cherokee name is Week. Her maiden name is Summerfield, and she's traced our lineage back to the place they now call Georgia, and Tennessee, and North Carolina. And I'm also part Filipino. My last name, Tagaban. In the Philippines, it's pronounced as Tagaban. And so over there, my grandfather comes from Batak, and my great-grandfather comes from Ilocos Norte. And my last name means the wielder of the sword. That means that my people over there in the Philippines, they gathered the food for the people. They used the machete to cut the food and gather the food for the people. But that's a little bit of who I am. And right now, I am coming to you from the land, the territory of the Coast Salish people, and the land of the Puyallup. And I just want to say, my hands go up to them, the Coast Salish, for being the stewards of this land for so long, and thank you for this opportunity to live upon your land and this area. And as I go out there into the forests, into the parks and all that, I always recognize that, that the land and who walked on this land before, and who was that who walked upon this land before I even got here, or before even all these buildings got here. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever gone out there and just like used your imagination, the power of our imagination, the power of our creativity, envisioning, just to go out there sometime, and just take a look off in the distance, maybe across the shores, maybe across the waters, or maybe, and just imagine what this land would have been like before all the buildings were here. Imagine what this land would have been like if it was just all just flourished with the trees, and the animals were flying about, and the rivers were still pure. To really step into that and really take a look at that and to step into that possibility that once was, that could possibly be again. Maybe. We never know. And so it's really good to be here. Perspective, just kind of throwing the perspective out there. And that's what I just wanted to bring to you today. Just to have a conversation about that perspective. And, and when I'm talking about perspective, I just want to just read from this here book. It's called The Little Book of Awesome. And you know, just to get us going and get us started off. You know, and the first thing I just open it up. The first thing, when you know, the little book of awesome says, "What's awesome? Hanging out with your mom." This one here. What's awesome? When the house guest leaves. You know, how many have you had that? You know, you have company over or people coming over and they stay, you know, and when the house guest leaves. My wife and I, first of all, we have to like get some house guests, I guess. Another thing in this little book of awesome. It's like screaming at characters in the movies to do things. Like, you know, it's like, how many times have you screamed at the movie theaters and, you know, it's like, don't hide in the graveyard, you know, watch out, they're back there, drive, get in the car, drive, hit him again, one more time. I don't know why you just hit him one time and then you just leave. You know, this little book of awesome also tells us walking into class and seeing a substitute teacher. How many of you, like when you were going to school or like walked into class and like, oh man, U.S. history, got to learn about that again. And then suddenly you see, oh man, check it out. Yeah, you know, I said Kevin here put on there, what's awesome? Knowing your identity, knowing about who you are and where you come from. Yeah, I agree, Kevin. You know, knowing your identity. Little book of awesome. Here, let me see here. I'm not going to say that one. Let me see. Finding hidden compartments in things you already own. Finding hidden compartments in things you already own. Or what? Get this thing. We know what was really awesome. This one time, my wife and I would like to go over to the Goodwill or Value Village, and she picked up this little notebook. She picked up a little notebook, you know, blank pieces of paper. She loves those little notebooks. She picked it up and she opened it, and what was awesome, she found $100. Awesome. And so it's like one of those things on perspective too. Is like just always looking for those things that are awesome. What's awesome out there? We can always find those. And oftentimes it's just to shout out to people. I know sometimes we can't gather with them right now and be with the people, but you know, just to post on their page, you know, just like say, hey, you're awesome, you know, or write a little note, say, hey, you're awesome, you know. And I used to do this thing when we did meet, just to whisper behind them, awesome, because we can never hear it enough, especially now. You know, there's so many people who are having hard times and out there in the world and struggling. That's why we're doing this with the Native Wellness Institute. We're doing these power hours just because we know that a lot of people out there having hard times. A lot of people are struggling, you know, and trying to get their foundation under them and stuff. And one of the reasons why we also do it with the Native Wellness Institute is because we need it ourselves. You know, I like to do these things because I need it myself. I need to be reminded about these things. I need to, you know, and I need it for my spirit, to take care of my spirit. You know, and so today, this year, I just want to talk about perspective and how can we get perspective on things. And one thing is just like, you know, like Kevin said, knowing your identity. So many times I ask people out there, it's interesting, you know, how our native people, I love our Indian people, man. I love our Indian people because you ask them who they are. And most of our Indian people, they get bust out with, like, you know, their heritage, where they come from, you know, and the land that they come from. And if they can't, you know, we got to help them out. Help them out. You know, we got to embrace our people. But I love heritage, I love heritage and I love identity with all people. And so I'm always asking, like, the non-native people too, it's like, well, who are you? What's your identity, or what's your heritage? You know, because, you know, if they're hanging out with Indian people, native people, I you know, it's like we're always like going, hey, who are you from? Where are you from, brother? You know, and then when non-native, we ask them that question. There's always well, I'm kind of a Heinz 57, or I think I'm like part German or French, Scottish, or you know, or it's like, oh, I'm Asian, you know, part Asian. You know, actually, Asian people, they kind of know more about who they are. And so there's that hesitancy there. And oftentimes people say, "Oh, I'm an American." That's great, you're an American. So am I. I'm an American. But what's your heritage? Where's the dust of your ancestors? Where does it lie? The very bones of those who dreamt you into existence. And I love that. That we've been dreamt into existence. But to learn about your heritage, I once talked with this here gentleman. He was Cuban. And I'm not talking about Ted Cruz. I hear he's on his way, abandoning his people in Texas and heading over to Mexico, of all places, eh? That's a whole nother story. But anyways, this here young man was, he was Cuban. And I asked him, "So who are you?" I said, "I'm an American." I said, "Okay, you're an American. So, well, but what about your ancestors? Tell me about your story." And then he started to share with me about how the story of his grandparents were refugees. And they literally got on one of those boats with like just packed. It was a small boat and it just packed, overflowing. And they came from Cuba and they hit the shores onto Florida shores, Florida Keys. And they struggled. They fought hard. And here, this gentleman was up in Alaska. He's working for the law enforcement. He was working his way to become an attorney at the time. He's living a good life. And I told him, how can you not acknowledge the struggles of your ancestors, the struggles of your grandparents to make it over there, to come here so that you can have that better life? How can you not acknowledge that? And what they've done for you. And to say that all you are is just an American in this here country, and we can go into that, that's all you are. Acknowledge them. And then after that, I saw a tear come down. A tear came down. And he said, "Yeah, my grandparents, they'd always tell me stories, and they did struggle so that I can be here now." Just like all of our ancestors, eh? My ancestors, I'm Cherokee. My mother's full-blood Cherokee. And my, I look at her sometimes. Have you ever looked at your mom and dad, your grandmas and grandpas, and see yourself in there? Sometimes I look in the mirror and I wonder, who is that? Whose eyes are those? Are those my great-grandfathers or my great-greats? Whose nose is this? I know this nose is a Cherokee nose. Big old nose. But whose nose is this? Whose eyebrows and whose hands are these that I have? Are these my great-grandmas, my great-grandfathers, grandmas, grandpas? Whose are they? And I always wonder that. And so, have you ever done that? But acknowledge your ancestors, because we've all been dreamt into existence. And so I'm looking outside right now. I'm in my front yard, my front room, and we have an Amazon Prime coming up, and my dogs are going to bark. And so if we're going to bark with purpose here. Well, you guys going to bark? We're going to bark with purpose here. Here we go. Man, if they're going to bark, I might as well help them bark with us. I hope some of you are barking with me, man, because we just had the Amazon just drop off some stuff out there, and so they're going to bark away at that guy. I said, might as well bark all together. So, anyways, I'm a little crazy. That's all right. So, anyways, yeah, our ancestors, man, they dreamt us into existence. And so, with that, I think about my ancestors who were on that trail of tears, and how many of them like just perished along that trail, and how many more relatives I would have had if they made it. I remember cousins, aunties, uncles. I would have had if they made it. But yet so many of them were born on that path and that journey, and the songs that they sang, and the resilience and perseverance they had, and they made it. And I look at my mom, My mom's a nurse, and I see this presence and strength in her. This resiliency and this spirit in my mom. And I know that she got that from those ancestors who made it on that trail. And somebody says that so many of our ancestors, so many trails that are out there. The long walk of the Dene, and the Choctaw, and all our people. We had these here. We all have our trails when you start talking about indigenous people. But check it out, man. And if you ever look in a mirror, look in that mirror, and you'll see that perseverance. You'll see that strength in that mirror, the resiliency, that spirit that our ancestors carried so that we are here now. And so with that, I look in the mirror sometimes and I feel, yes, I talked about this the other day, the responsibility I feel I hold to pass this on, to keep it on. Because we're in our history right now. In our history right now. Things are hard, things are rough. I got to hand it out. I mean, the people down in the southern states, down in right now, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, all the way on up, Arkansas, and those southern states, Georgia, Tennessee, all those southern states right now, they're really having a hard time. They're having a hard time. And I'm sending prayers out to them. But part of that too is like even those prayers to them. It's like that's part of my work to help the people, to be there. So when you're looking in the mirror, just remember that you are seeing the perseverance of your ancestors. Yeah, that strength, that knowledge. Yeah. And so, what's the perspective on it too? Oftentimes I work with men in this work, in wellness. And the struggles, and it's one of those things too, is some of the work that I do. It really bothers me that the greatest threat to women, the health of women, are men. Yeah. I struggle with that. And talk about part of my responsibility in this world I'm taking on is to bring healthy men into the world and to help men heal. We have a lot of healing to do, men. And that's part of my responsibility that I'm putting out there. It's one of those things too. It's like there's so much work to do, and we all have our skills, gifts, and talent. Each and every one of you, right now, I'm talking to you. You have your skills, gifts, and talent. Whatever that may be. You may be an artist. You may be a storyteller. You may be a financial wizard. You may be able to build houses, homes. You may be a singer. Whatever it is. We all have our skills, gifts, and talent. And so part of my responsibility, and I'm using my skills, gifts, and talent, is to work with our men. And that also is we got to pick our battles. because there's so much work that needs to be done. You got to pick your battles because you can't do it all. You can't do it all. And believe me, I used to try to. I made an attempt to try to do it all when I was younger, and I was in my late 20s, early 30s, even mid 30s, into my late 30s. You know, I was always trying to get out there and try to like heal the world. And I got sick a lot, ill a lot, to the point of pneumonia a lot. I've had it several times. And so that was just a message to me. Something was telling me I need to like slow down, take some irons out of the fire, and be more focused on a few things than trying to do the whole. I had to put things in perspective for myself. I had to put things in perspective for myself. And I put things in perspective for myself too, as far as like just picking my battles and taking a look at what is my skills, gift, and talent. I needed to do a lot of healing for myself too. Self-reflection. Self-reflection. You know, so that healing, before I could really start getting out there. I'm still healing. I'm still doing that work. And then again, that's one of the reasons why I do what I do. You know, and I tell this story, but I'm gonna read it to you right now. And one of my favorite stories, you know, and talk about perspective. And the story goes, the warrior and the old man. Some of you may have heard it. Love this story. Somebody gave me this story over 30 years ago, and I'm still using this story. The old man was sitting quietly in his lodge when suddenly the door to the lodge opened, and a huge figure stepped in. A great shadow was cast against the wall. "Old man, I have come to listen to your words. This is what I was told to do. Why? I do not know. So what can you tell me? Speak. I have much to do." The old man looked to the direction of the loud voice. "Yes, warrior. You ask what I, an old man, can say to you. I do not know. I will ask questions instead. The answers that you give will be yours." And with that, the old man lifted his hand and placed it on his chest, on his heart. When you come into the lodge, do you strike fear into your children, into the woman? Or do they know that they have nothing to fear from you? Is your heart exposed to the ones that you love? Can you softly sing a song of love to your children and say to that child and to the mother of your child, "I love you"? Will your thoughts be of your people, or will it be of only yourself? Can you see the strength and the beauty of the women, especially as she travels another sunrise to sunset? Who gave you life, and who but Mother Earth allows you to walk upon her every day? May the day come when someday a young man like yourself comes to listen to you. Yes, I too was a young warrior, only when I could take my children, hold my children gently, stand with dignity for my children to witness, respect to the strength and the beauty of our women, and to tell my children, my wife, my people, and myself, "I love you." This was the day I became more than a warrior. I became a man. And as the young warrior turned to go, he caught the eye of the old man, who had a wise and distant look in his eyes. And he felt that the old man saw into him and beyond him. The young warrior swiftly dropped his eyes and said quietly, "Thank you, grandfather," and left the lodge more slowly than when he entered. I got to tell you, though, I really enjoy that story. It's a lesson for myself. So many times I've gone into things, I've got into places, especially when I was younger, thought I knew it all. I had an arrogance about myself. My mother always said, don't let your head get too big. But there are times, I have to admit, there's times when my head just got big, got huge. And there's times, I have to admit, there's times when I thought that I was better than others. I'm ashamed of that, yeah, but there's times where I thought I was better than others. And I really had to get a grasp on that. And there's times where I was just very angry. I was an angry young man too. And I sat with fortunately I had elders, I had people in my life who cared about me. I had elders, I had people in my life who loved me. And I got to tell you, my parents, and I'm blessed, I'm fortunate, yes, I had parents who loved me. And I know that many of our people, and there's many people out there who don't have that. They might have one parent who loved them, but maybe they don't have both of them. Or maybe they grew up in a very hurtful, abusive home. And so I have a lot of healing to do. I had a lot of healing to do. And as we heal and we grow, because what happens, we walk out there in the world looking like this, out there in the world. And we have these blinders on. And as we grow and we heal, we start looking wider, opening up those blinders. So we can see more. Because oftentimes that lack of healing, that hurts, that heaviness, what that is are the blinders. And the healing helps me get perspective on things. And so I'm learning to walk the world like this more and learn. And one day I hope that I can be that elder. I'm working on it. One day I hope I can be that elder. And not only that, one day I hope I can, what kind of ancestor am I going to be? Do I want to be? I could be that healthy ancestor, that wellness ancestor. Yeah. And I'm taking a look at some of the chats out here right now. Oh, we got a relative from New Zealand. Kia ora. Thank you also for just coming in and watching. And those of you who are just coming in and joining us with the Native Wellness Institute Power Hour, my name is Gene Tagaban. And we're talking a little bit about just the gift of perspective. And so with that story too, as the warrior and the old man, yeah, sometimes it's our thinking just shifts. It's our thinking that just shifts. And even the verbiage, how I talk to myself, how I feel about myself. Yeah, how I see myself. And it's one of those things, just I needed to become aware of how my system works. And when I say how my system works, it's how exactly my thinking, my voices, my thinking, how I see things, even in my imagining, my envisioning, my feelings that I have in my gut, core, or sometimes those feelings come throughout my whole body. Even the smells and tastes that I have. And even that intuition, that third eye, people call it. So I had to learn and get another perspective on things as I've grown, even now. And take a look at things in a different way. It was my buddy, well, not my buddy, he's my buddy, my good friend, and teacher. His name is Chris Makua. Up there he lived in Saxman. And part of his story is that he grew up in California as a young man. And his parents were gone, oftentimes long, far away. His father was a longshoreman. He was out to sea. And then his mother drank. And so she was gone too often. And so it was the streets down in California that raised him. And those streets took him in, and they started to mold him. They started to mold him. And as they started to mold him, he faintly remembered the words that his grandmother would tell him when he was a very small boy, like, who are you? Always ask him that question, who are you? Who are you? But as he grew, he got into gangs. He got involved with the gangs. Started selling drugs, running drugs, and yeah, there's a time where too, he carried guns and he shot people, being part of those gangs. He ended up in prison. And it was there that in prison where he was thrown up against the wall, and that's where they sliced his throat. And he nearly lost his voice. But it was then that he got the opportunity. He started to dream. He started to listen. He started to go on his healing path. And they finally eventually let him out of prison. And then he started to look for teachers, elders to sit with, to learn from. And he listened to his dreams. He had visions in his dreams. And he had a vision of going up to Alaska, to the land of his ancestors, his grandmothers, and to teach. And so he ended up in Alaska. And it was one day that I found myself sitting there with him at the sweat lodge. And he's talking and telling stories. And hauling wood in, making the fire. And it was this time we were at the sweat lodge, and we just walked in there, we're talk story, going in there, and we get into the lodge. He goes, oh, look at this. I seem to have forgot my drum. Well, I guess we didn't need it. And then he goes, oh, look at this. That's how he talked, because when he got his throat cut, I seem to have forgot my rattle. Oh, well, I guess we didn't need it. I guess the Creator will put us in a place, where we can handle things. Won't put us in a place where we can't take care of ourselves. Oh, we'll be okay. Anyways, he told me stories, but it was one time that Chris, he was dancing in the longhouse, the beaver house there in Saxman, and he's dancing. And then he gets in this position. I go, what are you doing, Chris? He says, I'm being a bear. I'm looking through the eyes of a bear. Ah. And then I ask him again, and he's got his wings out. And I go, Chris, what are you doing? He goes, I'm being a hawk. I'm looking through the eyes of a hawk. Started sniffing around. I'm being a wolf. And then later on I go, why are you doing these things, Chris? Why are you doing these things? He goes, I'm getting a different perspective on things. I'm looking at myself through the eyes of these beings. You see, the animals are our elders. They're our teachers. And we as Native people, we have that gift of perspective. We have that gift that we can go into their and look through their eyes. When you see a hawk flying over you, go step into that being and look at yourself through the eyes of that hawk. Or you see that tree, go look at yourself through the eyes of that tree. Or the raven or eagle that flies by, or a bear, or even the dog, or the blade of grass that you're about to step on. Look up at yourself through the eyes of that blade of grass. At yourself and see what comes up. And then he told me, now go out there, do that now. So I went out there. I started to look around. I saw a squirrel. At first, I didn't want to be a squirrel. And then I started to look at myself through the eyes of the squirrel. What did I see? Blue jay came by. I started to look at myself through the eyes of a blue jay. Oh, and then the eagle came by, raven. Big, giant cedar tree. I was looking up at it, then I went and became the cedar tree and looked at myself through the eyes of the cedar tree, looking down at myself. I went to the river. Ah, the river. And oftentimes it's the river. When you go to that river, it's the mountain coming down to you. The strength of the river. Those rivers have been here before even some of those trees, the people. Those rivers have been there for a long time, and those rivers hold stories. Those rivers hold history. Those rivers are ancestors. And to look at yourself when you're standing next to a river, looking up at yourself as you are the river. And it became this here ritual and this practice that I just started doing. When the rains fall. And oftentimes too, people again, I talk about the rains, and so many people are afraid to just get wet. Oh, it's raining. Oh, so they'll cover themselves up. But those rains are ancestors, ancestral rains, ancestral rain. Our people knew rain. Our people knew the water. So look through the eyes of that rain that has fallen upon you. So I went back in there, after some time, and I told Chris that. Yeah, so I went and looked at myself through the eyes of these beings. And he didn't ask me what I saw. He didn't ask me what I learned. He just went, good, good, good. Perspective. Looking at yourself through different eyes. And we have many stories about that amongst the native people. There's a story about how Salmon Boy, he got swept out to shore, out to sea, because he was disrespecting the salmon. He was leaving the salmon hanging up on the skewers so that the salmon would start rotting. He was catching too many salmon. He was bringing it onto shore and just leaving them to rot. And he's being disrespectful to the salmon. And it was one day that he caught a large salmon, one bigger with his gaff, bigger than he's ever caught, and he's hanging on. And he didn't let go of the salmon as it started to drag him out into the river, further out into the river, further out. And it was his pride that would not allow him to let go of that. And suddenly, he got dragged all the way out to the sea, and he disappeared. And when he woke up, he opened his eyes. He saw himself in the land of the salmon people. He saw himself there. And the salmon people taught him about the way of the salmon, where it traveled out there in the waters, which ones were going to eat it, the enemies. And out to other lands, he traveled up, to the streams, and brought in the other ones, up, and all these places he went down deep into the cold waters. And he learned. And it was one day that he found himself jumping out of the water. Because you see the salmon when they're jumping out of the water. They're celebrating. They're dancing because it's time for them to go home, back to where they were born. So the salmon, he was one of the salmon jumping out of the water on his way home. And it says going up that stream, battling his way up the river, up that stream, just as you see him just struggling to get up that stream. Suddenly he felt a gaff, a hook on his side, and he looked up on the very same rock that he used to fish on. Was another young man. And as he struggled, suddenly he just surrendered and gave himself up to that young man. They say that the salmon people, the spirit of the salmon, they stood in front of the Creator. And when the Creator was asking the salmon, what is your gift? Again, we all have our skills, gifts, and talents. What is the gift that you want to offer the world? What is that gift you want to offer the world? And it was the spirit of the salmon people. They say, I want to offer myself. I want to be the food for the people so I can feed the people. And it was then that the Creator said, that is the greatest gift of all, to be of service and to give yourself to the people. So he surrendered. He gave himself to this young man. And this young man took him, laid him on the shore, this large salmon. But the young man noticed around the tail of this salmon there was a copper ring. He didn't know what it was, and so he grabbed the elders to come down and take a look at this ring that was around the tail of the salmon. And the people noticed and recognized that this is the same ring that that young man used to carry and wear around his arm. The one that disappeared several years ago. That's that same ring. So they covered him up. They covered him up. That salmon sang songs, prayed. And that salmon turned back into that young man that disappeared several years ago. And that young man started to teach about respect for the salmon, respect for the seas, respect for the ocean, respect for the trees, how we're all connected to the trees, respect for the sun and the rain and the mountains, as that cold water comes from the mountains. And that young man became a leader for the people because he saw things in a different way now. He saw things with new eyes, with a new mind, a new heart. And he was able to give that new wisdom to the people, that perspective that he carried. He brought that back to the people. So oftentimes I think about these stories that we have, and I listen to these stories and the teachings that we have, and the teachings that we have. And so, any other wonderings out there? Thank you for being here. Those of you who are out here who are watching, listening again, this is the Native Wellness Power Hour. Just sharing a little bit of story, a little bit of perspective with you. Gonna teach everybody who's coming on. Yeah, you know, the fresh water, take only what you need. Respect for the people. Talk about water. Here we go. Water. And so, what time do we have here? I want to share something with you guys, with all of you. And it's just that again, that little perspective that we have on things. That perspective that we have on things. And call into our ancestors too. And how do we tap into that? And that wisdom of our ancestors. And how do we get another perspective on a little bit of our lives, where we're at? It's one of those things that we can talk about it, share with it, but how do we do it? How do we do these things? So I'm going to show you something right here. And I'm going to show you this, and I got all my little helpers here, you know, and I use these to tell stories. And one thing I'd like to share is that we're all stories. Our life is a story. And what kind of story are you going to tell? What kind of story are you going to tell? You're already telling a story. But we're going to have choice in these stories. What kind of story are you going to tell? So I want to just show you this as we're here. So here's my little platform. And this is me right here. I just want to share this. This little guy right here, that guy, that's me. Yeah, I'm a little monkey guy. You know, and so I'm this monkey and I'm walking through the world. I'm walking through the earth. And as I'm walking through the earth, oftentimes like right now, think about something in your experience that you really enjoyed. Like a sunrise or a sunset, or that river that we saw. Or maybe your children laughing or playing. Or maybe it was a time that you accomplished something. You graduated from high school or graduated from college. You know, or you did something that you didn't think you could do. Maybe you made your first drum, whatever it is. And so as we're walking through the world, you know, I'm thinking about this, and I'm looking out my own eyes in my experience. I'm looking at these eyes. And if I reflect on a beautiful sunset that I've seen up in Alaska, standing on the beach, and I see myself looking out my own eyes, having that experience. And oftentimes too, it's like when we have our experiences, yeah, we're just looking out of our own eyes. We're looking out of our own eyes. But sometimes, I'm going to take this guy. I'm going to take this little mouse. But sometimes we need to step out of ourselves. Just like my teacher Chris told me, step out of yourself and look through the eyes at yourself. Sometimes we need to step out of ourselves and look at ourselves. Look at ourselves and observe ourselves. So if this is our other part of ourselves, our thoughts, our minds, it's like we're standing here looking at ourselves, stepping out of ourselves. And what do you see? And stepping out of yourself, what would you tell yourself? What would you share with yourself? What advice would you give yourself? And I wanted to if you're, try this, if you're sometimes get anxiety and you fall on your nose. And I'll tell you what, because I've had anxiety, I still get it. And what happens is when I get that anxiety and I'm looking through my own eyes, that anxiety builds and builds. When I'm experiencing it firsthand, it builds and builds and builds. And anxiety sometimes is looking into the future, something that has not yet happened. But we're building anxiety about it. And I'll be honest with you right now, I'm building anxiety. I get, tax season is coming up and I'm building anxiety about that stuff. Or even going out to the store and meeting people and seeing who's masked up and who's not masked up and who's taking this for serious and who's not taking it serious. And so sometimes that anxiety, I need to step out of myself and look at myself and tell myself, Gene, everything's going to be okay. Take some deep breaths. Before you walk into the store, just walk outside, take some breaths of the cold air. Yeah. And so this is just getting a whole nother perspective on things. I gotta fix this guy, he keeps falling over. And so this is like me stepping out of myself and getting a different perspective on myself. And then sometimes too, I step out of myself too. And if Grandmother Mouse is around, what does Grandmother Mouse see? Looking up at me. Or sometimes, I'm going to grab this one right here. Ooh. It looks like a frog, but it's actually a turtle. And I'm going to say this is a turtle. As I'm sitting here in the world, sometimes I need the advice of my ancestors. I picked the turtle because turtles can live a long time. And so sometimes I need the advice of my ancestors. And so what I'll do is I'll stand there, but then I'll imagine my great-grandmother standing there. What would she tell me? How would she do this? How would she do this? What words would she have? Or my great-grandfather? Or even my great-great, who I've never met? What would they say? How would they do this? What bits of wisdom would they give me? What bits of wisdom would they give me and share with me? And have you ever tried this too? The possibility of even standing there and looking at yourself and communicating with yourself in the future? Like as if you are that elder now. If you were that elder, what would the elder you tell yourself? What would that elder say to yourself as you're looking back at yourself? And how would you get to the point where you are that elder? And it's one of those things too, is like that one day, I'm going to be an ancestor. One of these days, I am going to be that ancestor. And when I'm that ancestor, I wonder, what would I say to myself? How can I help myself? And that's what it is. How can you help yourself? How can you assist yourself? How can we teach ourselves? How can we help ourselves heal? It was one time in 2016. It was the morning of 2016. It was on October 9th. And it was Indigenous Peoples Day. It was Indigenous Peoples Day. And I went out for a bicycle. I like to ride my bike. So I was invited to go to Seattle to speak that day. And so I went for a morning ride. As I'm riding my bike, beautiful day, fall day, good crisp air, sun was shining briefly. It's getting to the end of my ride. And I'm pedaling away, and I'm just like, oh man, life is good, life is good. And then as I'm just going over this little hill, starting to pick up speed going down, I noticed out of the corner of my eye, a squirrel darted out. Big gray squirrel darted out. And he got sucked up in my front tire. And my tire just stopped, jammed, and I went slamming over the handlebars. And it busted myself up pretty good. But it's at that moment, as I'm laying on the ground, suddenly the wind just knocked out of me. I couldn't breathe. But I found myself stepping out of myself and looking down at myself and actually coaching myself. I found myself taking a step out of myself and telling myself, as I'm there above myself, just going, take it easy. You've had the wind knocked out of you before. Just relax. Keep breathing. There you go. And I was able to take that breath. And then I sat up, and I was still coaching myself. Okay, take a look. What's broken, what hurts. Felt around, and I was busting up a little bit, but I got up. But I remember distinctively stepping out of myself and starting to talking to myself, coaching myself, helping myself heal. And I was really interested. And so I wanted to ask about that. And so I went to some of the elders and talked to them about that. And it was Charlie Tailfeathers, who I'm not going to say was, he was with us. He is an ancestor now. And but I went to Charlie and I told him what happened. And he goes, oh, sounds like that hurt. I said, yeah, it hurt. Oh, yeah, you really got slammed down pretty good there. And I was like going, yeah, I did. He goes, oh, yeah, well, that's interesting. What happened there? And then he started to tell me about the story about how when he was in Vietnam. And I have permission to tell this story, even when he was still with us. He still is in spirit time. But he said that when he was in Vietnam, that he could tell those who were going to make it and those who weren't. Those who were going to make it are the ones who actually stepped out of themselves and started working on themselves, telling themselves, coaching themselves, helping themselves out. And he said the ones who weren't, who were minor injuries, they actually stayed inside themselves, and they just started to feel sorry for themselves, or feel the pain, or he just I can't remember how he described it, but he says in that moment what happened was when you hit the ground and you got yourself slammed and the wind was knocked out of you. You said you stepped out of yourself, and that's what you were doing. you're helping yourself heal. You stepped out of yourself and you became your best coach. You became your best advocate at that time, helping yourself out. Because sometimes we need to step out of ourselves and take a look at ourselves. Sometimes we need to take a step into the eyes and look at ourselves through the eyes of an elder or somebody who inspires you. Sometimes we need to step out of ourselves and take a look at ourselves through the eyes of the eagle or the raven or the tree or the mountains or the rivers. And I have to tell, and I'll be straight up with you too. Sometimes I need to step out of myself and look through the eyes of my partner, my wife, and get her perspective on things and see how she feels about things so that I can have a better understanding and create a better relationship, not only with her, but with myself, and find those answers and those solutions. And so, let me see here. Oh, running out of time. And again, my ancestors, my uncle says, time sometimes goes by so fast. Sometimes it goes by real slow. Either way, it's going by. So make the most of it. And so it was that was a gift that Charlie gave me. He says, no, what happened was that you were, you helped yourself. And sometimes when we're on this path, we get initiated. We get initiated into higher levels of awareness. And he goes, that's what happened to you. Looks like you just got initiated into a higher level of awareness. Oh, that's good, that's good. And I told Charlie, he says, man, but why did I have to get busted up so bad? And then he tells me, he just kind of laughs, bro, it happened that way because if it didn't, you wouldn't have listened. Which is true. Which is true. And so, so thank you. I'm just looking at some of all of you with your thoughts, some of your chats here. And so as we're coming to close right now, I just want to say thank you all. I just kind of like, I might have been all over the place talking about perspective, and different ways of looking at things. But that's our traditional ways too. We still have that ability to step out of ourselves and again, look through the eyes of the other creature. Of the eagle, the raven, the bear, the killer whale, the mouse, the tree, the rock, the river. Look through your own eyes, looking at your own eyes, looking at yourself. Look at yourself through the eyes of your ancestors. What do they see? Look at yourself through the eyes of when you're an ancestor. How can we help ourselves out? How can we heal ourselves? And in healing ourselves, we're helping others heal. When taking care of ourselves, we're helping others, and we're taking care of others. Because how can we take care of others where we don't have the energy, we can't take care of ourselves? Take care of yourself. You're valuable. You're worthy. You're worthy of wellness. And those ancestors dreamt you into existence. And here you are. I know dreams and I know prayers work, because here you are. Here you are. And it's a beautiful thing, man. It's a beautiful thing, my relatives. Yeah. So if you have time, just go out for a walk and just play around with your imagination, your perspective, your thoughts, your creativity. Just go play around with it. Like we were when we were children. We can imagine anything. Yeah. So with that, my name is Gene Tagaban. We're the Native Wellness Institute. We're here just to bring a little bit of love, a little bit of spirit, a little bit of wellness, healing to you. We're sponsored by the Noise Foundation. And thanks for the Noise Foundation. They've helped us and sponsored us so many times. And so with that, I think tomorrow we have Robert Johnston on. Take a look at our website. We got other workshops and trainings coming up too. And it's coming up this next month. So that is it's probably Jillian on the other side, same time, same place, every day at noontime. So thank you. I just want to say konachish, yak husani, konachish, yak ewe hai ade, konachish, ho ho, ho ho, ho ho. Blessings, blessings, blessings. My relatives.